Hey guys, it's Marcus with DesignIY, and you're watching a vlog video for my very first remodel, which happens to be a bathroom. Also, today, we've got to wire the entire room, and this was my first time doing that as well. So let's take a look at it. So jumping right in, I had a few questions that I didn't anticipate having. I get the concept of wiring. You have a hot, you have a neutral, and the ground's there for protection, and you got to get it to all the devices, but which device do you do first? And when you run the wire, where do you put the staples? And all those different things that I had to figure out for code. But just the general idea of where do you start, where do you end, how do you get the ball rolling? That's what we got to take a look at. So, not having any idea where to start, I did the first thing that I've been always taught to do, and that's write down what you know. And then once you can look at it, you figure out the next step. So that's what we did. Let's take a look. Alright, so I just drew this diagram, but it's really similar to the one that I had back then. I just wanted to put everything that I knew down on paper. Get all the walls, get the plumbing fixtures in there, figure out where I want the lights and the outlets, which is another video in lighting design. And once I figured out where I want them, now I can figure out which one's going to be first and how I'm actually going to wire it. A couple things I need to note. How am I going to do this? Am I going to daisy chain, going from one device to the next device to the next device? Am I going to run to a massive junction box and then just split all of the power all the way down to each of the devices, thus conserving this? Or am I going to run all the outlets on one circuit, all the outlets in another room on one circuit, and then the lighting for all of the rooms on its own circuit? Since the lighting doesn't take a whole lot of juice, you might see that every once in a while. So I came up with a scheme that I like. I don't like having the lighting all on its one circuit, because if you have any work to do on any light in any of the rooms, then all of the lights are off, and I don't want that to happen. I'd prefer to locationalize, have all my electrical devices on one circuit in one area. That way I know any wire in the area is likely tied to this circuit, which would be off, and therefore I'm safe to touch it, although I would check, of course. That being said, another reason why I would choose to daisy chain over the junction box scenario is connectors are going to be a fail point. If you have a fail anytime, it's usually a connector. So I would want to avoid using all of these connectors. Daisy chaining avoids the connectors because the devices are made to be daisy chained. You have two hots, two neutrals, and you can fit either two ground wires in there, or you can wrap one ground wire in there and twist the other one together. It's just a ground wire, it doesn't matter. But I can put one wire in, one wire out to the next device without the use of any of the connectors at all, just with a regular device. So limit the connectors, do the daisy chain. Second reason why I chose the daisy chain is because the GFCI outlet is how I'm protecting my circuit from ground faults. It's required in bathrooms or any device that's within 36 inches of a wetted surface. It's going to be required to be ground fault protected. So if I'm daisy chaining, the way this works is that if the ground wire, which goes in here, senses any sort of current, this will trip the circuit, thus cutting the electricity off to the rest of the devices after it. Now, the reason why this one has to be first is because electricity takes the path of least resistance. So if I had a GFCI outlet over here next to the sink, which would be obvious, right? Put it next to the sink. Then we had a toilet overflow, and then all of a sudden this outlet had a ground fault. It's going to take the path of least resistance straight back to ground this direction, leaving the GFCI outlet completely unaffected. If it's unaffected, it doesn't sense the ground fault, and if it doesn't sense the ground fault, it's not going to trip the circuit. So what we do is we put this first in line. That way, if this standard outlet has a ground fault over here next to the vanity, it's going to pass the current from the ground wire to this outlet all the way back to the GFCI, which is then going to trip the circuit because it senses the ground fault. So we now know that we want our GFCI to be first, and we want our switches to be last, because our switches are going to cut the power on and off to the lights, but we don't want it to cut the power on and off to our outlets, meaning we want our outlets live even if the lights are off. We now have a starting point and a finishing point. So I'm going to daisy chain from our GFCI over to our outlet inside of our tall cabinet, over to our outlet over the vanity, over to our switches, and we're going to distribute the power to the lights likewise. That's how I came up with my plan. Now then I just put it into motion. So once I knew what I was doing, and I had run the bathroom wire all the way from the service box all the way up to the bathroom, it was just sitting there waiting for me to figure out what to do, I ran into a pretty big problem. During the demolition phase, I decided to go ahead and do all the other demolitions throughout the house. Just, make a big pile of dust while you have all the dust, right? Well, unfortunately, that means removing walls, and those walls have the old electricity or the old wiring in them. And I happened to remove a wall that had the wire that fed the electricity to the entire house, because for some ungodly reason, all the lights and all the outlets were on a single circuit. So I'll meet you up in the attic and I'll show you what I had to do. 2 years later, this is that wall that we had to run that wire up. And again, this is not for the bathroom, but we had to do it for the sake of the bathroom, and I'll get to that when we catch you up in the attic. So we're up in the attic, and of course I have lighting now that it's 2 years later, and I didn't back then. But it was probably 20 degrees hotter than it is now, and right now it's definitely over 100 degrees. It is ridiculously hot. My skin is all wrinkly. Not from water, but from sweat, which is, I guess, kind of water. It's absurd. Absolutely absurd. So that being said, that wall that we were just looking at is right about here, somewhere back behind all this insulation. And the wires that I terminated went up and connected over here, where you see this really unsafe situation of these wire nuts where we have Romex tied to the old cotton insulated knob and tube wiring. And that went this direction and connected everything for the entire house. So I ran that wire up the wall to reconnect it so that we have power to the entire house. So before, I had ran the bathroom wire. It comes up out of the wall right about here, and it goes over to the insulated area, which is on top of the bathroom. So I'm on the other side of the bathroom, and this is where I actually used the bathroom wire to splice into the same hot and neutral from the from the original knob and tube wiring to run the entire house again temporarily. So we had to run that wire over there, power the house, disconnect the wire over here, and use it for the bathroom that we intended to. So now that we got that out of the way, I can take care of using the wire that we originally intended to use for the bathroom actually for the bathroom that we intended to use it for. And once that was done, we get to test it out. Did I catch my house on fire, or did I wire it correctly? Let's find out. So these two breakers, 2 and 4, are the new ones. So 2 should be the whole house now, and 4 should be just the bathroom. So I'm going to leave those off and turn the main breaker on. Nothing so far. Let's try the whole house first. Alright, that's good news. Let's try the bathroom. Even better news. Bum, 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 bum. That's supposed to be the vent fan. Did not work. Unfortunately, the bathroom still seems dead. Oh boy. Okay guys, found my issue and fixed it. Currently GFCIs are only one way. They're not reversible like regular outlets, so I had it wired backwards, as did I the other one. So you can see right now, this one is tripped because the button is out. That would be the red and green light there. So why don't we go ahead and reset that. Fan turned on. That's cool. Vanity lights, of course, are off. Look at that, we have light. Dang, it gets bright too. I'm stoked. I am stoked. I can now paint in the light. Oh, that's great. That is great. That is great. That is great. So you may have figured this out already, but since the time that I installed these till now, I've already learned that you do not need 2 GFCIs or more on a particular circuit. If you have one GFCI and it's at the beginning of the circuit, then all of the other devices after that are protected by that GFCI. So the fact that I had 2 in there was not good. In fact, in some instances, that can actually cause a competition between the two, and they'll be tripping each other. Especially when you hit the test button on one. So I've got that fixed now, and we only have the one, and it's around by the toilet. We're good to go. But for this video, that's it. Hopefully you found this insightful, you liked it in some way, and if you would, go ahead and full screen right now, click the like button for me. I appreciate it a lot. Hit the comment section up if there's a reason why you didn't like it or you want to see something in the future, let me know. But you're definitely going to want to click the subscribe button because next week we have the grand reveal of the tile shower, and you're definitely not going to want to miss it. Plus we have tons of content like this coming up in the future. So right now this is Marcus, DesignIY, I'm signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one.